Hi everyone, and welcome to Conversations Over Coffee, with coffee, under coffee, around coffee, but without coffee because we've got other drinks here. But nevertheless, that's the essence of our show. But you're also watching this on the Tony Tonkin Show. So welcome for another edition of our podcast, video cast, whatever you care to call it, whatever you care to call it, it's a cast. And with me, of course, is Dr. D. Michelle. Right.
Hello.
Today we're going to talk about Elon Musk. Must we? We must.
Well, only because it's kind of a big news story at the moment. And I've seen two people attributed with this comment. Anthony Albanese and Tanya Plibersek have, as I see it, both called him an arrogant billionaire. And I was thinking, is there anyone in the world who would disagree with that?
Well, well, Elon might.
Oh.
I mean, he probably won't disagree with the fact that
But he's a billionaire.
He's a trillionaire, actually.
Oh, is
So it's
he?
even
Okay.
more elevated than just a mere unadulterated
Well, my
billionaire.
apologies, Elon.
I'm sure he's watching us right now. So they have criticised him for what reason?
They've criticised him because of the what's called the Wakely stabbing. I'm not sure if we talked about that last week, where there was a Christian service being live streamed on YouTube, and a bishop giving the service, and a young man at the service, then stabbing the bishop and another person, as I understand it. And as I understand it, it was the stabbing video that the government want Elon Musk to take down from Twitter. And he's resisted that. On the one hand, I think he's taken down what's called he done a geo-block.
Yeah. So done a
Geographic
regional. It blocked it regionally.
So that Australians can't have access to it. But as somebody pointed out, if you've got a VPN, you still do. So they wanted to take it down altogether.
Yeah, worldwide.
Make it accessible to anybody
Yeah.
in the world. So because he's been pushing back on that and talked about Australia as having, the E-Commissioner being the centre or something like that, I think that's why they've been name calling, which the Labor Party can do, which I'm not necessarily very fond of them for that trait, to be honest.
What, name calling at all?
Name calling at all.
Yeah, because it never catch me name calling, which is something I do quite often, I hasten to add. But the reason, I guess, is that it also, having that video up, also propagates hate and fear and a whole lot of other things in the community that the government's trying to avoid.
I get that, but I'm a little bit puzzled. And my puzzlement is around the fact that they haven't done the same thing with the Bondi stabbings. And there were some horrible images which are still available on Twitter and elsewhere. So why do you choose one event and not the other? And I know that they've called that a terrorist attack, and I still don't even understand why they've
I don't think
done
they've been.
that.
Yeah, I agree. They haven't been very clear as to why it specifically needs to be identified as a terrorist attack, but I think that's part of the problem. The problem is, number one, it hasn't been identified. Number two, the images did create, and I think this is probably the key issue, the images did create a furor in terms of the number of people that turned up
Right.
to
Okay.
afterwards and who revolted,
Yes.
who protested, I should say, and some of them protested in some sort of ugly way.
They did, which is interesting in and of itself, because there wasn't an equivalent protest at the Bondi stabbings.
No.
It was because it was
It wasn't
a
deemed because
Christian being stabbed
well, that had a lot to do with it in the
with
Wakely
the
attack.
protest?
Yeah, because it was their revered priest who was attacked, and that invoked those people that hold to those beliefs to come out and be violent, which is
Or-
bizarre, I think, in itself.
Well, as I understand it, some of those who were a part of the crowd, the riot, came from out of the area anyway. So it was just an opportunity to go nuts.
Yeah, and I guess the thing that puzzles me a little bit is that happened all in real time.
What
So-
was the
so
other
what are
thing?
they-
The video was on YouTube. The
Yeah.
service was being live streamed.
Yeah.
So was it because it was on Twitter or because it was live streamed?
Well, I think it was because it couldn't be because it was live streamed, because you can't do anything about that. What you can do something about, though, is the videos that follow on from that, I guess. And that are those videos of people being violent, people smashing police cars, those sorts of things. So I'm a bit confused as to what it specifically is that they're objecting to.
Are they asking them to take down the stabbing, which was live streamed, or are they asking them to take down the images of the riot, which are available on the mainstream media?
Yeah.
That's where I've seen them.
Yeah.
I haven't necessarily seen them on.
Yeah, and I don't know which
social-
specific videos they're complaining about. And I think that the problem that we have here is that the government certainly wants to have a look at being able to control social media in terms of their misinformation that they present, and I think that's justified. In fact, there's some legislation in front of Parliament at the moment to do just that.
But can I interrupt and just suggest that are they only going to do that on social media, or will they go after Sky News, for example?
Well, I'm really hoping they go after Sky News.
If they went after all misinformation, then I think that would be fair enough.
I did a podcast on Sky News yesterday where they were becoming extremely upset about this legislation, which is bipartisan legislation apparently. So, so they're upset because I think at the end of the day there's going to be greater scrutiny over the opinions that people offer that are full of misinformation or disinformation. So I think that's going to become a bigger and bigger issue, and it certainly needs to be a discussion point, because we can't or should not allow information to propagandise certain groups of people, whether that be political groups of people or whether that be the people on the extreme right and the conspiracy theorists and so forth. You know, we need to have some sort of balance there so that the incorrect information is no longer offered, that people have to be a little bit more circumspect about the information they're going to offer. You know, quite often I see people like Sherry Markson say, "I have heard," and then they offer, you know, she'll offer whatever it is that she wants to say in the guise of, you know, someone has told me this, and we don't know who it is that's told her. We don't even know the validity of what she's saying, and often I believe it's her just wanting to make a statement. But in the guy, and
she wouldn't be doing a journalistic good thing, which is to protect your sources, though.
Well, I think this is the whole thing at the moment. You know, we've got the Bruce Lehrmann case also, which indicates that Janet Albrechtsen has not done the right thing in terms of verifying her sources and sticking up for her sources, and then being influenced by other people, by having conversations with judges and whoever she has conversated with. So there's been a lot of discontent, I think, with the way that the media has conducted itself, or the journalists have conducted themselves. And maybe there's a role for, there's a journalistic association, maybe there's a role for improving ethics and principles within the journalistic profession, so that some of this shit can be worked out.
So what I hear you saying is, though, that the scrutiny of misinformation or disinformation or falsities should be beyond social media.
Yeah, it should be. Should be right across the spectrum. It
because there's been a lot of complaint that they go picking on Elon Musk, dear Elon Musk.
Yeah, poor
arrogant billionaire extraordinaire.
Poor defenceless little bastard that he is.
But why haven't they gone and had a look at Rupert Murdoch's empire?
Well, they have been
trying. Calls for royal commissions.
There has been
for a long
time.
Calls for it, but no actual doing of.
Well, hopefully those calls will come to fruition. Now, I guess that's the point.
Otherwise, they do look a bit hypocritical, don't they? They just go after the one area of the media where it's very vocal opinion, but sometimes it's terrible. But it's very vocal opinion in the community. So, of course, they're not going to like that if it's not controlled.
Well, I think
they're trying to control that one area.
Yeah, and the other aspect of this too is the possibility for litigation, because apparently we're quite litigious in this country. So, I read today.
Recently.
Yeah. So so if you disagree with something or somebody that say for example Andrew Bolt says something which he has done in terms of this Muslim bloke,
Yeah.
and someone sues him, but the process to sue somebody is horrific.
Yes.
So why not have a system in place that sits before all of that?
Oh,
And
have a media.
Well, there's a mediation.
Regulatory body.
But we also have people like Reynolds who are planning to sue,
Yes.
still sue Brittany Higgins, which I think is appalling. But
Did you hear the latest though today? Is that Bruce Lehman was given the opportunity to not go ahead with the litigation. He was offered a settlement by Channel 10, and he turned it down.
All right, poor bastard.
Yeah.
I feel so sorry for him as
Silly.
well.
What a
Silly
man.
man.
Silly man.
But I guess the point is that there needs to be greater scrutiny over information that is provided to the public, whether that be through mainstream media or through cable services, or whether that be through social media.
Yeah.
That there needs to be, but then the question for me is always, who's going to decide? Who's the final arbiter of what is appropriate journalism and what is fact-based information that's provided to the public? Who in the hell is going to provide that? And that will have to be a quasi-government department, someone that's set up by the government in order to be able to do that, like the Safety Commissioner.
And theoretically independent.
And theoretically, and hopefully the person who ever runs that is, as I think the Safety Commissioner is, but then there needs to be legislation that supports all of that stuff as well.
I'm always suspicious though, I have to say, when there's bipartisan support of anything. Like there's been bipartisan support of attacks on refugees, etc. So I'm not always convinced that bipartisanship is a good thing.
Well, there's always somebody that will push back against it, though, I can assure you.
That's true.
Whether that be the Teals or the Greens or, Jackie Lambie's network or whatever. But there'll always be someone who pushes back and tries to give another opinion. And of course, and then there's the media themselves who will disagree with. So it's not like you're not going to hear back from those people that disagree. There will always be another voice. That's without doubt.
Okay. All right.
So the bottom line was that Elon Musk is pushing back.
Elon Musk.
Elon must push back.
He pushed back, and we're pushing back. Australia is now pushing back against him. So we'll see where that goes. I'm still puzzled about the whole thing, so I'll just wait and see what happens.
Yeah, well, I don't think there's a whole...
My question though is, that was one bishop, and he didn't sound like a very nice guy, really.
No, is
Some of it was certainly his opinions was not aligned with ours.
Well, he's a conspiracy theorist to start with.
Yeah. Anyway, that's no reason to stab him. But what I'm a little bit amazed by is that the absence of killing and stabbing of priests and clergy.
Oh, you like to see more of it. Dean wants to see more stabbing. This is news item.
No, given all the child sexual abuse, why haven't more been harmed? I don't know. It's a puzzle.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, isn't it? Why? Because there are lots of particularly, I guess, the men who do perpetrate violence a lot, as we well know, mostly. Yeah. Why haven't they taken to harming or whatever?
Well, yeah.
And maybe a lot of that's got to do too with the fact that there's a fair bit of time between the time that they were abused as children and adults.
Perhaps.
So there could be something psychologically there that says, there's other ways of combating this rather than through violence.
Yes, but it certainly undermines any assumption that if you've been harmed, you will harm.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't necessarily seem to, or certainly not.
Even though I found it interesting, Tanya Plibersek, that show last night on Australia's Story, where they talked about, is it Amy? Amy's her child? Anna. Yeah, they talked about Anna's sexual assault. And Tanya said, I I felt like killing him. And I think that's quite a realistic response. You know, like if your child is harmed, you're supposed to have protected your child. You weren't able to because of whatever the circumstances were. That you want to take revenge against. So that's the response. The difference between that is that someone like Tanya wouldn't because of her values and her ethics, but there's certainly lots of people who would. And that's the other area too. Yeah, like what about children who have been raped, such as that, or adults that have been raped, but children of people, and they and the fathers don't assault. So it's the other side too, where the fathers do not assault the perpetrator. You don't see much of that or any of that whatsoever. But when it comes to this religious shit, you know, if it's a religious-based argument, if it's a religious-based thing, or if it's, which terrorism could come under that, you know, if you're Islamic and you have a extreme view of that particular religion, or even the Christian right, an extreme version of that, which has been around bombing abortion centres in the US.
They're charmers, aren't they?
You know, all that. So if you're on the extreme end of a political debate, I think you're more likely to be violent than if not. You know, the Tanya Plibersek situation where, you know, people have been sexually abused when they were kids and so forth. There seems to be a religious component attached to this that propagates violence.
So,
does that make sense?
yeah, I hear what you're saying. I'm just therefore curious about why then clergy still aren't the ones who are harmed in some way as a result of their behaviour.
Sounds like you're advocating that people should. Jesus Christ, people are going to watch this and think.
No, not at all. I'm just curious about it. You know, how often do we hear of a bishop or a religious person who is assaulted, you know, in the way that that man was? And I'm not agreeing with that at all.
Well, because often those cases are going to court anyway, are they not? Most of the cases we hear of them.
That's when I hear of them, is when they have gone to court or they've gone to some sort of settlement.
Yeah, we don't hear of cases where someone has been sexually assaulted, hasn't gone to court, no action has been taken, and that person attacks the perpetrator. So it's only when they've gone to court.
That's true. So what are you suggesting, that there have been cases that we haven't heard
of?
Well,
maybe.
I'm
just suggesting perhaps there have been.
It was just because I've worked so much or read so much about particularly the Roman Catholic Church, but clergy abuse is widespread. It just struck me as a curious thing that on Saturday night apparently it was about religion, it wasn't about abuse.
Yeah.
As far as we know.
Let us know what you think in the comment section below as well. And so, can we move on to our second subject? There's probably a lot to talk about there and all of that. But the other thing we want to talk about was Civil War.
Yes.
Yeah, so we went and watched. So this is our film review section.
Yeah.
So
Don't go and see it.
No. It was.
Do we have to say any more?
No, that's probably it. After the first 15 minutes, I wanted to leave. I'd had enough. And I was sitting next to Dee and I reached over to her at one point and said, "How are you finding all of this?"
Well, I had already psyched myself up because I don't like that level of violence anyway. So I'd psyched myself up for it. So I was prepared to sit and stay. In many ways, it was probably no different than what I was expecting. Just a whole lot of violence.
Well, I thought that this film would be a discussion around what happens if Trump wins the election. So this is what I thought it was supposed to be about. And in a sense, I guess it kind of was. But vaguely, very vague. Maybe that's my interpretation and that's about as far as it goes. But
because that's what you think might happen anyway.
Yeah. I believe that if Trump gets in and he does what he says he's going to do, which is a dictator. No one's a dictator for a day, I can assure you. But if he does get in, then what is the likely outcome of that? And there are people talking about, you know, Steve Bannon and others are talking about a civil war. They've got Project 25, which is about how they implement appropriate people to be able to take over certain roles, that is about a dictatorship. So they've got these programs in place, and a civil war of some description is likely. But this show was not about that at all. So it was about three,
Was two camera journalists
and one
reporter and an older reporter.
Yeah.
So he was less involved, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Just more hanging around.
So it was during the time of a civil war
Yes.
between the West and the South and the East, or whatever. Between the West and the East, I think. And
It wasn't clear, was it?
It was between California and Texas, apparently.
There was the
against rest.
Western forces.
Yeah.
So California and Texas.
So there was no preamble to this. There was no. It just launched straight into this so-called civil war, without any real explanation as to how this civil war came about in the first place.
Yes.
And I think it just the whole freaking show just lacked context.
Yes, there was no story. It's interesting because when you look up Wikipedia, there's a nice little map showing all the areas of the United States divided into those various regions. But none of that was in the movie. So you had to do your research before or after to figure out what was.
And need I say, though, that apart from the lack of context, it had firstly, it was poorly written, wasn't well filmed, I thought, and the actors had just hardly any lines to say at all. So it was poorly constructed, it was a miserable failure. It had 7.6 on IMDb, and I can't understand why, because I gave it 5.5, and I thought that was generous.
Yeah, I think I gave it a 5. But I don't think my expectations were as high as yours, because I was expecting something to be violent and horrible anyway. So,
but I can look at a film and see what I think are the best qualities of a film, regardless of the story. So if it's nicely photographed, I really like that. If it's well acted, if it's got a good script, I can discount some of the other things. But this had none of them.
No, so don't.
Zero. So this is a C-grade movie. Do not go and watch Civil War. In fact, I'd probably advise you to start your own. So I guess the bottom line is don't go watch Civil War.
No, or if you must, my recommendation would be to go online, have a look at Wikipedia, get all the synopsis, the maps and everything, and it'll perhaps make a bit more sense.
Well, the Wikipedia page on the movie Civil War.
On the movie Civil War is much more informative about the movie than the movie.
And I guess the other thing, the thing about the Civil War, as I was saying, is that it was about what I thought would be Trump. What would happen in the United States if Trump was elected? That wasn't done. But
they didn't have an orange-haired man.
No, they didn't. He was. Spoiler alert, because you won't be watching it. He didn't exactly survive, did he? In the end. No, poor bastard. Really, there wasn't much. There wasn't much featuring of him either.
No, he could have been any middle-aged
idiot.
white man.
This is true. So let us know what you think. If ever you do have a chance to watch Civil War, I feel sorry for you. But nevertheless, and then Trump falling asleep.
And Trump falling asleep. Yes.
That was the other thing I want to talk about, was the stuff around Trump, his odour, the fact that has become kind of like an interesting side issue, not the real issue, but certainly a side issue in relation to Trump smelling and farting.
Well, the only thing of interest to me really in all of that was my feelings of slight sympathy with Trump for falling asleep, because I've done jury duty. Last week we listened to the judge, and it is very tedious, that sort of legal process.
Yeah.
So I might have fallen asleep. However, sympathy's gone.
That's right, and so it's interesting watching the Trump trial. We'll be absorbed. Well, I will be, not everybody else, but I'll be absorbed in that for the next few weeks, just to see how that all pans out. And what happens if, I was thinking about this the other day, is that in Australia, if you found guilty of a crime with a penalty greater than 1 year, you can't stand for Parliament. If you
But
found
he can.
this
He
is
could.
this is my point.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and if you're found guilty of a crime, I think also in excess of, I don't know, it's just a crime, whatever, someone can check that out in Australia, and you're already in Parliament, you lose your seat.
Right, which seems quite reasonable. Do
It
we
does.
really want, we have dubious people representing us, do we really want convicted criminals as well?
Well, no, we don't,
I
but
think so.
in the United States, he could still be in prison and still be president of the United States. How fucking crazy is that?
Don't they need
Tell
to
me.
rethink their system?
Well, they need to rethink the whole, including the, you know, the way they vote and the whole.
I saw that and I just thought that was it was almost unbelievable actually to
Yeah.
think that he could be guilty of this crime. He could be in prison, but he could still run the country from his prison cell?
He could, apparently.
Okay.
That is if he can pardon himself.
Oh, okay.
So he might, but he can
darling.
only pardon himself, but he can only pardon himself on federal cases.
Okay.
He can't pardon himself on state-based cases,
Okay.
and this one in New York is a state fraud case. So he can't pardon himself on this one, but he could on all the other, 87 charges or whatever that are laid against him. Well, that's been a hell of a time, and we want to thank you all for being with us. Is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah, we're thanking them.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank them.
Thank
Thank
you.
them. They're out there. Thank them.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. It's so
Thank
hard
you.
to get an appointment with you is a real struggle.
Absolutely. Yeah.
In the meantime, remember to subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for further notifications, click the like button, hopefully, and we'll catch you next time. So take care, look after yourselves, and more importantly, be safe.